I recognize myself for 5 minutes for questioning. So the first question is this. Look, climate activists, Treasury Secretary Yellen through the FSOC, and the Network for the Greening of the Financial System, along with the other global governance bodies, including the BIS and the BCBS, are all pushing the Fed to incorporate climate change into the U.S. bank regulatory framework and to channel credit towards so-called green investments, and are pushing a green agenda even into monetary policy considerations. Professor Skinner, do you believe that the Federal Reserve's supervision and regulation responsibilities assigned by Congress provide a clear mandate for the Fed to engage in efforts aimed at channeling credit to favor certain assets and disfavor others on the basis of purported risks from climate change?
No, I don't. The Fed's supervisory and regulatory mandates certainly do not support the Fed's efforts were they to have developed to proactively green the financial system. They may try to lean on the open-ended soundingness of safety and soundness or financial stability. However, the Supreme Court has been very clear that agencies cannot exploit discretion to do a number of things. They cannot effectuate structural change in an economy. The Fed should not be using any kind of discretion in its mandate to pursue goals that are on the executive branch agenda, that are fiscal goals. And agencies certainly don't have the discretion to implement new supervisory structures that break with political consensus in the United States. So although the Fed does have a mandate for safety and soundness, it can't possibly encompass proactively greening the financial system.
Thank you. Dr. Kupiec, numerous interlocked global governance bodies, including the Network for the Greening of the Financial System, Basel, the IMF, and the partisan FSOC, have been pushing U.S. financial regulators into the climate policy-making sphere. They have also been pushing for the use of highly speculative NGFS data and models in U.S. regulatory frameworks. Yet there's no transparency of what goes on at the NGFS. Do you see any risk to incorporating speculative, sometimes scare-inducing models of plausible futures by U.S. federal regulators when they issue principles, guidance, or regulations aimed at channeling credit toward some politically preferred activities and away from others?
I see a lot of danger there. Politically driven regulations, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, they change from administration to administration. The stop-go nature of these things impose all kinds of costs on banks that get transferred to businesses and consumers, and raise the cost of borrowing and raise the rates of return that businesses will have to pay. And it slows economic growth. And to mention the ranking member's comments, I would just point out that if the European Union decides to legislate and require banks to fund green industries and not fund brown industries, that would, if the U.S. didn't adopt the same procedures, that would leave open a huge profit opportunity for U.S. banks, where they could fund the brown industries and presumably make quite a profit on that. So there's a certain conspiracy here to make sure across the globe that if you can't just push down brown financing in Europe if it could pop up in the U.S. So you see the standards have to sort of apply to all large banks globally, or they're not going to work.
Yeah, thanks for that. And we have been told by federal banking regulators that the NGFS is not a standard-setting body and is simply a place to share information. But it's more than that. It's a collective of central bankers, supervisors, regulators from around the world, including China and Russia. Work done at the NGFS appears to be funded by outside money, including from environmental activists and potentially U.S. adversaries, with no clear line of sight into the funding for Congress and the American people. Professor Skinner, are you aware of any research that has found added value to U.S. federal banking regulation and supervision from adding the NGFS into the policy recommendation arena? And do the federal financial regulators take into account potential risks to their independence and to U.S. sovereignty from blindly relying on climate policies established by an opaque global organization with membership that include our adversaries?
It's unclear why the Fed participates in the NGFS, given that it has no mandate for sustainability, either in its monetary policy function or in its supervisory function. And certainly there are risks to both its independence, its credibility, and to U.S. sovereignty. In terms of its independence, Certainly, once the Fed dips its toe into the waters of politically contested questions, which the question of whether banks should be used to facilitate a green transition certainly is, that compromises all of its mandates and implies that they're up for grabs for other sorts of political gambits.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Illinois, Dr. Foster, is now recognized.